You are listening to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all the latest news, Overwatch League results, and mishaps in Overwatch. Here are your hosts, Totemly Drunk and Edinar.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all things Overwatch. I am your host, Totemly Drunk, and tonight on episode 191, we're gonna rewind the clock just a little bit and take a look at some of the biggest Overwatch stories that hit in 2019. We'll share our thoughts on the magnitude of said changes within not only the game, but also its competitive scene. And, we'll also discuss some of the recent levers in regards to the Overwatch League on-air talent as we are transitioning to that home and away model going into the 2020 season. There's been a lot of discussion on that, and especially today. But before we can get into the news and introduce you to my co-hosts, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight on Twitch for our live show. And of course, I have to thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So joining me tonight, as always, reading in the new year, is my co-host Edinar. And Ed, it's been a little bit. We had a little bit of a holiday break. We're back. We say goodbye to the past decade. We're ushering in a new year now in 2020, and we're kind of ventured into a lot of unknown still at this point in regards to Overwatch, the patch cycle, what the landscape of the league is going to be looking like. So amongst all of that chaos, how has the past, week and a half been treating you?
Well, I mean, I went on vacation in Florida, so this past week and a half has been pretty relaxing. Presently, I am jobless until tomorrow morning when I start my first day at my new job. If you're watching, I have a different background. That's because I'm in a different location. Because last week and a half ago, I moved and then went on vacation the next day. So I moved closer to the Milwaukee area here in Wisconsin. So I've got that. I've been playing a lot of Hearthstone because all I traveled with was my laptop, and I'm not playing. And it's a Mac. So I can't play Overwatch on that. So I was playing a lot of Hearthstone while I was away, which is a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying that. But I came back and I've been playing a decent amount of Overwatch and a decent amount of Apex, kind of like a 50-50 split, which has been nice. I've been getting zero luck with the new skins and all that fun stuff. I don't get what it is. Like
There's only 4.
Well, any of the new stuff. I haven't gotten any of the new skins outside of the one you earned the first week, like from the 9 wins. I think that was Soldier, like Ugly Sweater Soldier. Yeah. I got that, and then I got the May intro, and then voice lines after that. Haven't gotten any of the skins, so nothing like that, and that kind of sucks. But what can you do? I think everyone's kind of going through Overwatch withdrawal because there's no Overwatch League. The meta changed, and people are still upset. I'm shocked.
To be fair, it wasn't like a drastic change.
It wasn't a drastic change, but everyone hated Doomfist. Well, Doomfist is not in the meta at this point. It's more May, who's horrible and should die in hell, and like Reaper. And Hanzo. That's 3 DPS. That's more than we got last meta. So it's just one of those things where no matter what happens, people are gonna be upset about the new meta. But
last meta was also 3. It was Reaper made Doomfist.
Yeah. Was it really?
So effectively, no change.
Yeah. Yeah, but no Doomfist.
Yeah, that's the only differential.
But so I think a lot of people are going through withdrawals. I think you'll see a giant increase in love for Overwatch in the next month and a half once we start kicking off the Overwatch League. So, how's your past week and a half been?
It was weird. Like only piecing together one show for a week. I was like, what am I what do I do with all this free time I have? I just spent a lot of time. I wasn't really streaming on Twitch, but I was tuning into a lot of other streamers, just friends. So I was, hanging out with Major Death. I actually won a giveaway earlier for a free month of the Hearthstone Replay Premium. So I was, like, digging through that to, kind of, like, sorting rank by rank to see, like, how the Face Hunter, which is what I had been running, post-patch, how that was faring at my level, and it seemed to, like, be pretty
You're a
steady
horrible human being.
until you get to, like, rank 5, and then it drastically changes.
You're
But
a horrible
I
person
did...
for running
I pieced
Face
together Galakron, Warlock, and Pirate Warrior, but I haven't used any of them yet. But, it is the start of a new month. So I did not get any higher than rank 11 because, like, I had only really pushed for that one day and kind of just left it at that as I awaited, the shaman changes that were set to hit. But outside of that, really not doing a whole lot, just mapping out plans for OWL by the number, since that's set to come back here on next Tuesday, so we'll be back to doing, I'll be back to doing, 4 podcasts a week. For you, it will be 3.
Only three. Only 3.
Oh, man, that's...
Yes.
You're slacking. I gotta make up for that some other way. But all in all, like, we're getting to the point now where Overwatch League is getting pretty close. The hype is definitely getting higher and higher. And, we're kind of at the point now where it's time to start ranking teams, but lo and behold, we still don't have full rosters for everyone as of yet, so, That's a thing.
That's a horrible thing, is like, you're just like, okay, the Titans are going to be announcing at least a couple more players. Like, Bumper still doesn't have a team. We know Bumper's going to sign with someone. Bumper's not going to be a free agent. So, yeah, I kind of want, like, I'm kind of getting pissed that we haven't even gotten the rosters yet.
Yeah, and it's not like there's a ton of time between now and when the Overwatch League is back on the air. Because the countdown right now is at 37 days.
Yep. So, they'll probably wait until, like, are they doing, I can never remember this. Are they doing like a preseason type thing?
They never
or
said. I wouldn't
show
imagine
matches?
so.
Yeah, so would I. I would imagine they do something like over in China, Korea, with those teams while they're over there. They do another one in the U.S., something of that nature. London and Paris may play each other, that kind of thing. So, who knows? I'm sure they will to build up hype, but there's so much information though that we just don't know about the Overwatch League for next season. And it's 37 days away, and it's infuriating.
Absolutely, but, tonight we are here to reflect on this entire year of Overwatch and Overwatch League throughout 2019. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of the biggest news and changes that surfaced over the past year. And we actually had some pretty big changes across the board. And I will say, like, I think one of them in particular wasn't as impactful for me as I thought it would be. But we'll get into the roll queue here in just a little bit. So to start things off, let's talk about one of the newer features that was added in 2019, that being the workshop mode, which was released on April 24th by the development team. So basically, the workshop mode offered a scripting system that allowed players to further expand customization options within the game browser. Which, wasn't seeing like a whole ton of play outside of being used to like create custom lobbies for like game nights or used in like private scrimmages, things like that. So basically, when this mode launched, there was a couple of different preset game options that were available to you to just kind of like dick around with. I know one of them was like the molten floor one, aka, the floor is lava, so anytime you were on the ground, your hero was taking damage. They also had one that gave everyone a double jump ability, which was kind of like a pointless one. There was one where it was one ultimate, which was another one that was just kind of, whatever. But, there's been, like, a ton of, like, hide and seek game modes, both, the preset as well as different iterations from the community. And then, over time, they kind of added on to these different presets. And, some of these were kind of based off of the direction of some of the community members. So, like, I know at one point they added Fire Dome, which is kind of like their take on the Battle Royale genre, where, you would have a circle and it would just, shrink closer and closer towards, the middle part of the map on that end. There was also Balanced Mystery Heroes, which basically forced both teams to have, 2 tank, 2 support, 2 damage dealers. They had the Mirrored Deathmatch, so everyone was playing the same hero. And then they also had the Hero Gauntlet, which they base off of one of the more popular workshop modes at the time, that being the gun game. So basically, anytime you would pick up a kill, you would move on to another hero, and you would cycle through about, like, 20 different heroes, and then, like, towards the later stages of the game mode, it would get harder. So, like, I know one of them was, like, Mercy Pistol only, there was one that was Torbjorn Hammer only, and those were always the last 2 in the lineup. Now, I will say, Ed, of course, like, we have seen so many different iterations from the community as a whole in regards to how they're using the workshop mode. But, looking back, I know initially we were just like, okay, like, this is more of a distraction piece at the time. Do you feel like that has still kind of held true up until this point now?
I mean, workshop mode, when it first came out, everyone was super hyped for this. And it is a really cool feature, but it is definitely something that has fallen off dramatically. Like, when's the last time you went into a workshop mode game?
A couple days ago.
You're supposed to play along with me here, totally. But, like, in reality, like, outside of game nights, maybe, you're not logging into Overwatch just to do workshop mode stuff.
Right.
You're, like, it was great. It's a great feature to include in the game because you do get some fun stuff here and there, or some good practice ranges and stuff like that to help you out. But it's not something that is big in the game at this point. Maybe you start seeing something pop up more and more now that you have the waiting to play.
Right.
That could possibly make it more relevant and get people back into it, but yeah, right now you're not logging into Overwatch to play the workshop mode. Now, with that said, I love that they have the workshop mode in there because this is how you get different genres of the game, and we've talked about this numerous times about all this stuff that Overwatch could learn from stuff created in workshop mode, like a la Warcraft 3 MOBAs. Like, MOBAs were created off of the Warcraft 3 engine, and and Blizzard, in their very quick to adjust mentality, decided not to jump on this, and then MOBA became, switched over to Dota, and you had Dota, then you had League of Legends. All that stuff started from modding in Warcraft 3, and I think now Blizzard is catching on. Like, Auto Chess even was one of those too, was a different mod on Dota. And, finally Blizzard caught on with Hearthstone Battlegrounds. But I think with Overwatch, with this workshop mode, they can really learn and implement some of this stuff into the game. We just haven't seen it yet. And I think we will. That's one of my hopes for 2020, is that we start seeing some of these awesome things from workshop mode implemented into the actual game, like a ping system or stuff like that.
Yeah, and I will say too, I know initially when the workshop mode came out, the amount of creators that were kind of entering the fold because of the mode specifically, I was, really nice to see. You had people like Darwin Streams probably at the forefront of all of that, because he seemed to be like, the godfather of workshop mode or whatever, the community was dubbing him at the time. And, you know, these modes that the community did range anywhere from, like, aim practice tools to, like, card games, fighting games, there was, like, racing games. There were so many different iterations over, you know, the course of time that what we have seen. And, you know, it's just a tool that allows so many possibilities, and it's really up to, you know, the community to just further explore it to see, you know, what other crazy shenanigans we can kind of get into. Now, that being said, I will say, like, some of them are a lot more useful than others, or, you know, just more fun overall. So, like, some of the standouts, at least utility wise, that really stood out to me since the workshop mode came out. Darwin came out with the Ana grenade tool, which was a way to help you with predictive positioning for your anti-nade. So it would kind of like map out where the point of impact would be, and then whenever you would use the interact key, what would happen is it would allow you to toggle the camera to be in more of a like top-down map view for like the nade view. So you know that's been a really useful tool, especially on my Ana account for Tumbling Nana. So I was using that one quite a bit, and that one was the import code of 498NV. But you know, most recently, the one that I've been using the most is something that we talked about, you know, a couple of weeks ago, and that was the Practice Range 2.0, which was done by PMA Jellies, who has done quite a few different, like, aim training game modes here lately, and this is with BTRZE. And basically, with this one, they added, like, so many different things. They added jump pads to, like, basically give you more high ground access. This was the one that had, like, some Metro turrets that would be oncoming. There were the character models, set movements. You would have the Widowmakers coming in using their grapple animation, Pharahs just floating around in the sky. You know, you could even practice, like, being nano boosted. So, like, you could practice your, you know, Deadeye, your, you know, Nano Blade, anything like that. And then on top of that, you know, you could use, like, the interact key, and then you could spawn, like, a Baptiste or Mercy to have that pocket. And you know, looking back, out of everything that I have played in the workshop mode, that has been the one that has been the most use. Because a lot of these other, like, aim practice modes have been more, like, mini-game based, and they haven't been as practical for me. And this is the one that I keep going back to, and I'm glad to see that PMA Jellies has been just sticking to a more structured view and not like really expanded and trying to do like other things. So they're really focused on just getting better tools into the hands of the community to, you know, just warm up while we are waiting in queue, or, you know, before we jump in queue for that matter too.
Yeah, see, you're using workshop mode correctly. You're trying to make yourself better. And I view workshop mode as something completely different than that. Like, yeah, you could use it, and it's good that they have the practice range for people like that, like you, who use it to get better. I think of workshop mode more as, let's create some crazy shit. Like, all right, so there's one I actually played. I actually did play this like 2 weeks ago, while I was in queue for DPS, and I had never even heard of it before, and it was Silver Surfer May. Have you played this one?
I've not. No. What is this one?
So basically, it's a race almost where you spray your May, obviously, and you spray the ice down underneath you, and you like glide forward on the ice.
Now,
like kind of like
is it increased movement speed when you're on the ice?
Yes. Okay. And it does, but like it also, if like you're not aimed just right, it judges how fast you're going based on like the specific amount of ice being shot at the ground. So if you're not aiming in the right spot, you'll slow down a little, and that's why it's a race. And you start at like point A and go to point B on maps and stuff like that. That was actually super fun. But yeah, you know, you're always gonna have these cheeky modes, but like we need those people to make these ones that make people better, the practice ranges, the Ana grenade ones, and stuff like that, that really can help improve all of this. Like everyone's gameplay. Like you need to have a mixture between the two. So And workshop mode has done that. It's just died off dramatically. But I'm glad there's still people out there creating things.
Yeah, I think the other standout for me, which isn't necessarily a tool, more just like a specific game mode, was an update to the free for all deathmatch, which was themed after Avengers because they did it based on the Affinity Stones. Now, the way that this one would work is obviously you would have, 6 different stones that you could pick up on the map. And, they would kind of like alter your character in a number of different ways. Like, one of them would increase how quick you move. There was one that provided you with health regeneration, one that increased damage, one that decreased the damage that you take. I'm trying to remember what else. I think there was also one that like pulsated and did AoE damage around you, and I cannot for the life of me remember what the other one was. But basically, like whenever you were carrying one of the Infinity Stones, you would have like an indicator above your head, and then the whole point of this mode was to collect all 6 of the Infinity Stones, and then you have to like survive essentially for 30 seconds, and that is when you would do the snap and win the game. So like fun tweaks like that have been a welcome distraction as well, but like you're not really practicing so much for like warming up or getting game ready or anything like that. But I like those like side distractions like that with the mini games. So like that was one that I played quite a bit. Obviously, like there's improvements for like Anna Paintball, which has been one of the fan favorites in regards to like community game nights. The McCree Hot Potato was another one that really kind of took off in regards to the community. So there's been like a fairly healthy mix between things that are practical and then things that are just good for like dicking around in, essentially. Now, at the end of the day, we're always looking for ways to improve the core mechanics of the game. And as you said, like we really haven't seen too much on that end. Now, we have seen ping systems introduced via the workshop mode, and we know that is something that the development team has been, eyeing at doing in the past, and even something that they're planning on revisiting. But we don't know what the timetable is looking like on that end, or whether or not that's actually going to get patched into the game, whether it is in its current life cycle or going into Overwatch 2. So I'm still waiting for like that first major change that is going to affect the core mechanics of the game, and we just have not quite seen that yet. And I feel like ultimately that was the end goal for the workshop mode, so we still haven't quite hit the end game, so to speak, for the workshop mode as of yet.
No, I don't think we have. And I honestly don't know if we will until, and this is a big if, until they allow them to alter the maps. Once that, if that's allowed, then you're gonna start seeing some of this crazy stuff happen. But there are limitations that these content creators and the workshop mode creators are under with just having to use the maps given to them. They can adjust everything around them, but they can't do anything to the maps. And without that, you're not going to get that new game-changing thing coming out of workshop mode. So hopefully sometime soon they allow us to, edit the maps, because then you could start finding, maybe we close off this. Maybe there's a different map type, a different game mode that they can introduce to the game. Who knows?
What they should do, Ed? They should just remove all of the assault maps, right? And then throw them in the map editor, and then see whether or not the community can fix the game mode.
Right. Now we talk about all this, but in reality, what we have coming up? Overwatch 2. Electric Boogaloo.
That's not the run.
Yeah, it is. That is the technical name. I heard it straight from Papa Jeffrey Cap.
Yeah, okay.
It's one of those things where they're probably not going to make any adjustments to the workshop mode because they have Overwatch 2 coming out. Which, you know what, I maybe release another Hero 2, a couple patch updates, but I don't blame them for not really going all out for, the game now when they have Overwatch 2 coming out later this year. So
Rumored.
I don't know.
Rumored.
Rumored. If it's not up this year, then all hell will break loose. Like it doesn't have to be out. Like it'll probably be out sometime around BlizzCon. That's what I'm thinking. Fingers crossed.
Think so?
I think it's going to be out around maybe before BlizzCon. But yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I have some doubts on that, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. Obviously, we don't know what the timetable is looking like on that end. So outside of the workshop mode, there was also, this fairly big update to the game. That probably had the single biggest change to Overwatch. Outside of the removal of no limits. Like, to me, that's probably still the bigger change between the two. But we basically got Role Queue being introduced over the summer, and this was back in the middle of July. So Role Queue essentially made it available for players to, select what role they want to play, whether it's tank, support, or damage. And, this was rolled out in not only competitive play, but they also brought it to quick play, which I absolutely love because it made quick play less of that clown fiesta, and it was more in tune with more realistic expectations for players that were leveling up to 25 and what to expect once they hit 25 and enter competitive play. That's not to say that it's a perfect mirror between the two, but it's less shenanery than
you don't have to you don't have to deal with 5 DPS.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No one tank, one support, 4 DPS compositions anymore on that end, which was a welcome change. So because of that, this also had impacts, within the game on the competitive side, because it meant that, with different roles being made available to queue as, it also meant that, you had opportunities to do placements on a per role basis. So basically, in order to get place on a specific role, you would have to do 5 placement matches, which was down from 10 in prior seasons. So each role would basically have separate placements, you would have separate skill ratings, and this was a massive change, seeing as a player's skill rating can vary pretty drastically role by role. And I know that's truer for, some people more than others, but, even on the higher end, too, I can't tell you how many times I see a top 500 DPS player suddenly have to play, Lucio, and then feeling like they don't belong in the lobby that they're in, because it has happened quite a few times. So basically, in competitive, once the season would end, players would earn, those competitive points based on the high skill tier that they had obtained per role. So you'd basically earn more competitive points overall if you completed your placements on each of the 3 roles. Now, of course, and with this was kind of a direct response to what was happening within the game, specifically the game's meta, which was dominated by triple tank and triple support for months on end. And, that was probably the most vocal we've seen the community, honestly, maybe ever, because of how long that meta in particular had lasted. But, the thing with the community was, a lot of people, when this happened, saw this more as a band-aid fix to what was happening, rather than them trying to individually tweak select heroes and try to nerf them that way. They're just like, okay, now you can't queue as that 3rd tank or that 3rd support, and then, just go at it at this point. So I would say, as a feature, the way that the community outcry has been, or just the overall response, has been kind of middling success here since, mid-July. I thought Role Queue as a whole would be the single thing to, bring me back into the game. I really thought that would kind of, revitalize my passion to play the game competitively. And I look back, and that honestly has not been the case. There have still been several seasons since July where I haven't even finished placements on one role, let alone on one account.
Hmm.
And that's not to say that I don't enjoy the feature or I don't enjoy the game or, how things have kind of like transpired since then. It's just at the end of the day, the best way to keep me involved in competitive play is to still queue with a six stack. Selecting the role that I want to play is great for many reasons, but like it still doesn't alleviate the fact that if you're in a solo queue or a duo queue environment, or regardless, if you're not playing in a six stack, you're still having to rely on the other players that you were grouped with. And that is still, to this day, like one of the most infuriating things, especially when you factor in things like private profiles and not knowing what people are playing. So you don't effectively know whether or not, whoever is your other person on said role actually plays that character or not.
Yeah. Spider actually made a good point in chat saying quick play is the best way to play the game right now, and I couldn't agree more. When you have like what Roll Q has done has forced competitive and quick play to play the game the exact same way. Like before, it's like, okay, I need to play with non-asshats. I'm gonna go play in competitive. Where people understand you can't do 5 DPS. You know what I mean? Now you basically like, okay, now you have to play 2-2-2 in quick play, and you have to play 2-2-2 in competitive. Now, outside of the top end of the game, there is no, like, get it out of your heads now, people. We've stressed this before. There is no meta from like plat and down. Like there is
It's the perception,
perception of meta of
and that's
what
always
better
been true.
players play. Exactly, and that's going to be every meta for every game for till the end of time. Is people are going to be like, well, I saw the pros play it this way, so that's how we should play it. Well, you're not as skilled as the pros, and people just don't adhere to that. And which is exactly how they should play. Play the game how you want to. So you're playing quick play the exact same way as you're playing in competitive. And really competitive, the only advantage to competitive over quick play now is you can earn points towards a golden gun, but in quick play, it's just less stressful. Like, it's quicker, less stressful, and you enjoy it more. And like that's what I've been doing. I haven't even been playing arcade mode. Like, because arcade mode used to be my login, screw around, I'll just queue this, have fun. Now I'd come in and I'd do quick play. And you know what? It's very enjoyable. Like, I love the introduction of roll queue because it allows me to guarantee, like, if I want a quick queue, I'll just go tank. Or I'll just queue if I'm putzing around, I'm watching another stream, I'll queue for DPS. And then I'll watch somebody on stream and something like that. And, you know, Roll Queue has done great and bad things for the game. It's pushed some people away. It has, because of they are the one trick DPS heroes who get sick of the queue times. Like, that's what they want to queue into games right away and then play DPS, and that's just not how it works anymore. Even in low levels, pleb levels, you still have to wait 6, 7, 8 minutes to get into the game as a DPS player. It's why you never have to worry about DPS players leaving the game, because they don't want to wait in queue, which I'm fine with. It's just, I don't know. I'm with you. It's nice to the game, but it didn't bring me back in the way I thought it would. But it has something to do with not having like a steady group of people that I play with.
Yeah.
Like, if I had a steady group of people I play with, that's a whole different story. Even if it's like 2, 3 people, then I'd probably be on a whole lot more. But I just don't have that. And Roll Q did nothing for that. Like, it didn't diminish it. I just have never had that.
Yeah, now, of course, like, this also had its effect on the competitive side of the game, because with the Overwatch League, we basically had 3 stages out of the 4 being completely dominated by one meta at the time, which was, as we mentioned, 3-3. So a lot of triple tank, a lot of triple support. And, that's not to say that there weren't teams in the Overwatch League that kind of did things a little bit off kilter or off meta. Looking at you, Chaindu. But there were definitely some teams in particular in the Overwatch League that were heavily impacted by this change compared to some of the others. Now, one of the biggest problems that the game had at the time, at least in the pro scene, was that you had all of these DPS players that were not actually playing the role that they are known for or practice on. So you saw a lot of these DPS players doing one of two things. They were either stuck in Brigitte jail, or they were playing the Zarya, which in a lot of cases was the carry in the 3-3 meta. Now all of a sudden, you have, hit scan players coming back to the forefront. You have your projectile players. You have your flex DPS, someone that can cover all sides of the field. But, it was just one of those things where, not knowing the direction of the game at the time, I felt like the burnout factor was just... It was speeding up because they didn't quite know whether or not they were going to move on to a different role. And you could see that based off of the player performance or how people were kind of holding themselves about on stage. Like, you could definitely tell by the facial expressions of some players in particular that they did not want to be there. And I think if there's one team in particular that you can pinpoint and you can just be like, this team absolutely dreads the state of the game right now. Look,
Philadelphia Fusion?
Yeah, the Fusion were by far...
Nailed it.
Like, you look at someone like Carpe and EQO, who were so handcuffed by 3-3 and not being able to play their role that, how many times did we utter their names out of, like, just disappointment or just concern for their well-being? Like, it's just one of those things. You don't want to be seeing these players playing something that they're not known for. And to a degree, it definitely lowered, maybe some of the quality of the games. But 3-3 also brought in a lot of team synergy and teamwork kind of, like, to the forefront, which was great at the time, too. But there were so many different drawbacks. So to see, like, that burden or that sigh of relief from a lot of these players has been a welcome change. And, I just hope moving forward that we start to see the perception of the meta, or whatever the pro meta is going to be at the time. I want to see it open up more where it's not a constrained, like, 7 or 8 heroes in particular at any one time. There have been times when we've seen, like, 11 or 12, and I want to get back to that point, but I just don't know if we're in the current spot where that's going to be an ongoing thing, especially when we don't have things like, hero bans or, map bans. Well, we have map rotations, I guess, so that kind of counts.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, there's other things that we could do to kind of bring other heroes into the forefront, but right now we're just kind of constricted to what the pro meta is currently.
I'm like, oh, I have to unmute myself. Nope, I was already not muted. No, I completely agree with you. And you brought up one thing that I believe will come some point this year, and that's hero bans. I think hero bans is the next logical step. Like, we had the goats, and goats could, without all right, take role queue out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Goats could have been gotten rid of with simple hero ban for pros. And if you get rid of it in the pro system, it will not be the meta in the game. Like, if people aren't seeing the Overwatch League players playing goats, they won't play goats on, in competitive ladder. It's just the way things go, because they'll be like, okay, let's go with this. Now, you can still introduce hero bans into the competitive scene, which I still think would be a good thing, but there are logistical things behind it that are very controversial, like who gets to pick the band, like stuff like that. Which we've gone on and on about, but like if you just introduce that into the pro scene, you get rid of goats, and then you introduce roll Q. Then people start thinking of roll Q as less of a band-aid fix for goats and more of a this is awesome to help the longevity of the game. So it'll be, I hope that they bring it out. But again, we have Overwatch 2 coming out, so who knows what the hell they're going to do, if anything, before Overwatch 2 comes out. Like, that's the big wild card in all of this is we don't know what's coming with Overwatch 2. They could be like, you know what? We got rid of all assault maps for Overwatch 2. Like, it just is something batshit crazy. Like, they could do something like that with Overwatch 2. We just don't know it yet. But, man, goats was literally the worst thing that's ever happened in this game. Like, it was just not fun. It sucked to watch.
Unless you're a Zarya player, then you probably had a ball.
Yeah. If you're Zarya, the only reason the Shock were only reason the Shock are as big as they are, not because they won all the time, but because they're the only team that made playing goats look fun. Because of how crazy aggressive they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Titans in that regard too.
I'm not even going to include the Titans on that. Like, I think the Shock made goats 10 times more fun to watch than even the Titans. Like, Bumper was fun to watch, but that wasn't because of goats. Bumper was fun to watch because he's like, I'm going to Suicide Squad off the edge of this map. Like, but Sinatra and Moth and Rascal pushing people back into their own, spawn zone and goats was just super fun.
It was more team-oriented compared to what we had seen.
Mm-hmm. So, like, that was really cool to see, but overall, goats was legit the worst.
And I will say, like, from a viewer standpoint, I did not hate watching 3-3. As Spider said, like, it was less on individual skill and more about teamwork, but I feel like, as a whole, the divide from the community leaned more towards disdain than affection for the meta at the time. Especially since that's all they had been seeing time and time again whenever you were playing on ladder. But, of course, since then, we've had some other balance updates. We've had a couple of new heroes added into the fold. And in 2019, we got the introduction of Heroes 30 and 31, that being Baptiste and Sigma. So looking back, Baptiste was announced on February 25th, and he was released like 3 weeks after that on March 19th. Sigma was announced on July 22nd with the release of August 13th. So we got basically one less hero release compared to the 2 prior years, because we got 3 in both 2017 and 2018. So, both of these have been pretty interesting heroes, at least in the current landscape of the game. Probably more prominent than what we would have imagined compared to other, new release heroes. You had Baptiste coming in, who had, Immortality Field, which at the time was, one of the most unique abilities in the game, allowing him to prevent allies from, falling below 20% of their health, as long as they were within the area of effect of the lamp. Then you also had his window, the Amplification Matrix, which beefed up not only damage but healing output for a 10-second duration. So of course, both of those kind of had ways to play around them, but I felt like the community took quite a while to fully grasp how to handle the Baptiste Immortality Field, to the point where, whenever one of those was down, it just was not getting killed, and I felt like that was going on for, the first couple of months upon release. And then, with Sigma, everyone grossly underestimated the impact that Sigma was going to have, both in the game and what toolkit he had provided to the game. His damage output was through the roof with his primary fire, and, the ability to like apply constant pressure to the opposition definitely pushed him to the forefront on that end as well. You know, he had that experimental barrier, which offered really the only floating barrier in the game. You were able to block line of sight from things like a Widowmaker, or, you know, push it towards a Pharah, you know, to block some shots on that end, which no one else could do either, really. And then on top of that, you know, you were able to, you know, gain armor through eating projectiles. His gravitic flux could basically force people off of point contesting. Not to imagine like the capabilities that you can unlock with pairing with other ultimates like Deadeye. So, you know, we got some combinations in that regard as well. And I haven't even touched about the rock through accretion and how absolutely absurd that ability has been, not just for highlight plays, but also the amount of CC that brings as well. So I think as a whole, when you look back at both Baptiste and Sigma, you know, they've had an interesting effect on just the state of the game, where both of them have really kind of brought on kind of like a similar situation to like what Goats brought, where we were seeing people playing off-roll picking up Baptiste, whether they were a hit scam player or someone like Rascal, you know, from the San Francisco Shock, being the one to really like put that stamp of approval on that character and fully like unlock the possibilities with the compositions that the Shock were running at the time.
Yeah, Baptiste was one of those interesting characters where the kit for him was built for a DPS player. Like, it's a DPS kit. Like, the abilities are DPS style abilities, but it's a healer. Like, you know, you had the grenade launcher for heals, just like you have, you know, the grenades for Junkrat. You have the aiming of his damage abilities, which we all know now, way better than Soldier 76. You know, you had the escape mechanics, you had the launching of the immortality field. Like, it was the kit of a healer, but the abilities of DPS. And that's why you saw somebody like Rascal really kind of strive on that. And I still think DPS players probably would do better on Baptiste than actual support players, because of, you know, how much damage Baptiste can actually output while also healing at the same time. But Sigma, you said everyone underestimated Sigma, and that is an underestimating statement. Like, nobody expected Sigma to be what Sigma was. You know, Spider said, chat, even on PTR, everyone's like, oh, this is going to be easy to counter. Everyone's just like, oh, they'll just play Sombra and then it's countered. You know, stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, Sigma comes in and basically creates a meta around Sigma. Like, this was all possible due to Sigma being there. And that's something we have not seen from a new character in this game's history. Because most new characters, I don't want to say they suck when they first come out, but I think they're purposely undertuned a little. Just for the simple fact that they don't want them to come in like super overpowered.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of that too, like there's usually like a 3 or 4 month window before we actually see a new hero like fully unlocked in regards to meta potential too.
Oh, it's for sure. Like Anna is the perfect example of all this. Like, Anna was awesome when she first was released, but nobody quite got the kit, so they buffed her. And then all of a sudden she became like, once people started to like catch on, they're like, oh yeah, no, Anna's way too strong, we need to nerf her, because nobody really like struck onto that. But like, Sigma is one of those characters that came out, it's very unique.
Mm-hmm.
Sigma does not have one specific overpowering OP ability. Like, it has he has a lot of good things. He's got the movable barrier, he's got the secretion, he's got the ultimate, like, he's got a lot of good abilities. I don't think any of his abilities are OP. But it's just, he's so well put together and so well put together when he was released, that it was just like, holy crap, like what's going on here? And then all of a sudden you start pairing him with Orisa, like it just created for chaos. Like I think one thing the community did get right with Sigma is when Jeff came out first and was like, Sigma's a main tank, and everyone's like, no, like this is not a good main tank, but this is a ridiculous off tank. And that's what Sigma's been. Sigma's been a ridiculous off tank. I love playing Sigma, even to this day with the nurse. Sigma is probably my favorite tank person to play. So I don't change a thing about Sigma, but yeah, Sigma was the most impactful new hero in the history of the game.
Yeah, I think for me, Zarya is still my favorite tank, but even though I feel like I'm really terrible at Sigma, I do have a lot of fun playing him, especially with that toolkit. And you know, it's been interesting to see what role of tank player has been coming in to play him, because there's been like this mix, not only of main tanks picking up the role in the Overwatch League, but also the off tanks. So he's really been the only hero to come out, at least at that position, that has kind of like blurred the lines between what specific role is he going to fit at the pro seed. So that's been an interesting thing to gauge. But absolutely, for me, like, he's 100% off tank. And, you know, even with all of the recent changes to the barriers, to how armor reduction is going, you know, Sigma is still everywhere in the game on ladder, and even in these invitationals that we have seen here as of late. So he's still pretty prominent to the current meta that we are seeing.
Yeah, and like to your point, like the perfect example of like who is playing Sigma comes down to, in my mind, Gator. Like that's a prime example. Gator from the Atlanta Ring. Gator is a Reinhardt main. Was a Reinhardt main. In contenders, gets called up. All of a sudden, he's the best Sigma player, like arguably the best Sigma player in the playoffs. And you're just like, wait, what's going on? There's stage 4, and you're just like, what's going on here? Like, you have these main tanks playing off tank. You have the off tank switching to off tanks. I don't think we had any DPS playing Sigma outside of maybe Boston, but that whole thing was a shit show. And
it still is.
It still is. And same with Houston last season, because that was a shit show as well. But you know, it's definitely going to be one of those things where you're going to see people that you're not expecting to see play Sigma and get used to it. So either a main tank, an off tank, or a DPS player can all play Sigma to a high degree, which is not normal for a character.
I mean, that's just because he's not normal, because he doesn't wear shoes.
He doesn't. He has one skin where he wears shoes, I thought.
He does.
And everyone should be required to wear that skin.
It's mandatory.
Yep.
They just lock all of the other ones.
Yeah, it's like everyone in Overwatch League is wearing like their team skins except the Sigma player that has like the Christmas skin.
Yeah.
Like, all right, fair enough. I approve of this. No toes needed.
Absolutely. So other than that, probably the biggest news that kind of hit in 2019 was from this massive leak that happened before BlizzCon that unveiled Overwatch 2, which was, you know, officially announced at BlizzCon of 2019. Now, this leak at the time left us with several unanswered questions that we had. And, you know, we were really hoping that, you know, heading into BlizzCon, we were gonna get answers to all of our questions. And we got some. There's still a lot of unknown that we need to try to sort through and figure out ahead of the release. But basically, what we knew, Overwatch 2 was going to introduce a new game mode in Push, which would be like the first new game mode, or game type, to the game since launch. So that would be playable in both quick play and competitive play. And then that would come with 4 new maps, at least for that game mode, on top of other map releases. So we're getting Toronto, Gothenburg, Monte Carlo, and Rio de Janeiro. Now, outside of that, we got the tease of new heroes that included Echo and Sojourn, both of whom had made appearances outside of the cinematics and things that we saw at BlizzCon, even dating back to, the 2018 BlizzCon, for that matter, with Echo appearing with the Ash reveal. So you also know, Overwatch 2 is going to have a new engine, so we got a new look, new UI, all of that good stuff, and that co-op is going to be like the primary big thing with the expansion, or Overwatch 2, whatever the hell you want to label it, because they do such a piss poor job at marketing what the hell this game actually is supposed to be.
I don't think they know what it's supposed to be.
They call it a sequel. But
a revolutionary sequel.
At the end of the day, Ed, looking at it on paper, this absolutely 100% screams PvE expansion and nothing else.
Well, I wouldn't say and nothing else. I mean, we get a whole new PvP mode.
Well, that's not specific to Overwatch 2, though, since Overwatch 1 is merging with Overwatch 2.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, I guess then any introduction to a PvP or PvE would be a PvE expansion, because everything they add to PvP would just be adding on to the PvP. You got to look at a big picture, Totem. Big picture.
When they don't even know how to market it, it's kind of hard to see what picture they're actually trying to paint on that regard. But anyways, so with Overwatch 2, we got a new story mode, we have hero missions, and we also have hero talents come in that will only be active in the player versus environment content of the game. But again, at the end of the day, one of the biggest questions we had was, what is going to happen to the base game? What is going to be done about the cosmetics that we have earned over the past couple of years? And we do know that all skins, all cosmetics, all the progress that you have made will carry over into Overwatch 2. Now, we still don't know what the release date is going to be. We don't know what the price point of said game is going to be. We don't know whether or not the base game will go free to play. That's another big question. And I feel like that is absolutely crucial for the growth of the game. They need to make that move at some point within the next year. But we basically know, regardless of if you purchase the PvE content, you're going to get the updated engine. So you'll have the new look, you'll have the new UI, you'll have the new modes outside of PvE, you'll get the new maps, new heroes, basically everything except the co-op. So, you're not in a position where if that doesn't interest you, that you lose out on all of this content. You're just locked out from the co-op missions, and basically that is it at this point. But the whole explanation and the way they went about announcing it still leaves me baffled, because as we said, they really don't know what the vision of this game is outside of them saying oh yeah, we have all of this stuff planned, we can't really tell you anything about it, but this is a lot bigger than what you guys are expecting. So the overall scale of this sequel or expansion, whatever you want to label it, it could be massive compared to what the community expectations is. But right now, all we can do is just kind of sit and wait and just question what the overall patch cycle is going to be with new releases, whether it's new maps, balance updates, hero updates, up until this unknown point of time.
Yeah, they introduced the core aspect of Overwatch 2. They gave us the high level synopsis of what actually is going to happen. And now granted, me and you actually got to play a little bit of it in the story mode, but that's a very small part of this. And they gave us the overall general story or what's going to happen. I don't know if they know it's going to all include. That's the other thing is I'm not sure it was finished when they announced it. And I mean, when I say finished, I mean
What was
from a
playable?
core level.
Okay.
Like they may not have decided on everything. They just wanted to announce it to get it out there because they needed as much positive press as they possibly could have gotten. They have been after the Diablo 4 fiasco from the previous BlizzCon, everything that went with the Hearthstone stuff. Now, granted, the Hearthstone stuff I don't think played into account having to announce more stuff to make the fans happy, but you had the Overwatch community down because of goats and everything like that. They needed to get something out there to truly create buzz. I don't want to jump on the bandwagon or jump off the train on any of this because we don't know shit about it. Like, we don't know when it's going to release. We don't have zero idea what hero missions are. We didn't get to see any hero talents outside of the 4 characters we got to play while we were doing it. And even then we weren't able to choose the talents. Or anything like that, or what's going to be included. What are they going to do to the game? Are they going to introduce hero bands? Are they going to get rid of maps? Are they, it's just, there's a million questions around Overwatch 2 that are just out there. And they like, you want all the answers, but I don't think it's ready for them to give those answers.
And to that point too, like I let's say the leak never happened. I don't feel like at this point we would have had less questions answered. Cause I don't want to say like it forced their hand to reveal it with the leak, cause like it was probably already planned at this point, cause like even outside of that, we knew something was happening, cause it was supposed to be one of the bigger years because of how much they've been touted in this particular BlizzCon. But at the end of the day, it's just like we need to see what the cycle is going to be up until this point. Like, is it going to continue to kind of be like the slow drip cycle of balance updates, maybe a new map, maybe a new hero, or are they just gonna hold off and then just completely like? I don't want to say that they're going to halt production of things on the Overwatch side of things, because that would almost be suicidal in some regards.
Yes.
But I want to just see, like, in the pipeline, when exactly are they going to be pushing this stuff out, specifically on, like, the PTR? Because I have to assume at some point we're going to be seeing a beta for Overwatch 2. And it's more than likely going to focus on the PvE content. Maybe even they'll have a separate one for the new game mode in push. Like, if they're shooting to release this in fall of 2020, they need to have that shit out in summer on the PTR. Yep. And right now, we're just kind of shrugging our shoulders because we don't know how game ready this is going to be. Because, like, I'll be honest, like, while I enjoy the content at BlizzCon, I wasn't necessarily wowed by any of it because it felt still very early on in the stage. And that leaves me really worried about whether or not 2020 is even in the picture for Overwatch 2, knowing that we do currently have that slow drip of content currently within the current state of the game.
Yeah, it would be a death sentence for them if they just kind of went dormant until Overwatch 2 came out. I do think they'll still release new heroes. Maybe not new maps, but I don't think not releasing new maps is that big of a deal. Like, new maps people like, but it's not detrimental to the game.
Right, and we already know, too, like, they are working on new maps for each game type as well.
Exactly. And I mean, you have games out there. Look at League of Legends. And now, granted, I am not a League of Legends master, but don't they only just have one map in League of Legends?
I mean,
want to say that
based off of certain insights, I don't even know if that game exists anymore.
It does exist, but I think they just have one map. So not introducing a new map, not the end of the world, but they need to introduce new heroes. They need to introduce balance updates and changes still. And I'm not saying they need to introduce a bunch of heroes. They introduce maybe Junker Queen and then one more that will lead into Overwatch 2. Like 2 heroes and balance updates. That's all they need to do from like here on out till Overwatch 2 if it does release in fall of, second Q4 probably of 2020. They need to release probably 2 new heroes, and then in like June, maybe June, they announce the beta starting in like end of July. So then you have July, August, September of the beta, and then October you have the action.
As it dies.
As I die, and then in October or whatever, it's the launch of the game, and then November you have BlizzCon where they
announce nothing because they just released the game.
No, what they would do is they'd announce maybe like a new hero
or a new mission
coming out, a new mission or something like that. So that would be my timeline guess. But they cannot go radio silent when it comes to like Overwatch 1. That'd be horrible for them.
Absolutely.
And everyone.
So let's go ahead and shift gears into the competitive side of the game. So looking at the Overwatch esports. So 2019, pretty big year, especially when you factor in, kind of just the way that the league expanded. But before we talk about like that global vision, I want to revisit the San Francisco Shock run to the championship, which is still like something that's in the back of my mind because of just like it's probably not going to be something that's going to be duplicated just because of the way they went about doing it. So basically all of this was set in place after a map 7 loss on Rialto against the Atlanta Reign. So that sent the Shock down to the lower bracket of the playoffs. And of course, the tail end of that match had, a reaction clip from Moth that would go on to, honestly, like, become one of the biggest reaction gifs in the entire Overwatch scene over this past year. And the Shock would basically go on to cause absolute havoc in the lower bracket. They would basically 4-0 their way into the grand finals, picking up wins over the likes of the London Spitfire, the Los Angeles Gladiators, Hangzhou Spark, and then the New York Excelsior. Now, basically what this meant was we were primed for another rematch, which would be pretty storied for the 2019 season, pitting the San Francisco Shock up against the Vancouver Titans, who were a team that they had met in 2 different stage finals at the time. Each one of them having taken one of those matches, so they were pretty even throughout the year, dating back to, the 3-3 meta at the time. Now, the Shock would go on to defeat the Titans and sweep them in the grand finals, taking a win 4-0, with map wins on Lijiang Tower, Eichenwald, Temple of Anubis, and then Watchpoint Gibraltar to close out the series. So basically, in route to the championship, you had the Shock winning 20 straight maps in the playoffs, which is an unmatched feat in regards to Overwatch League standards, at least in regards to the playoffs. Dating back, they also had, like, a golden stage where they won 28 straight, and, no other team is going to be able to match that. It earned them a lot of top nods in regards to, like, Esports Team of the Year. I know they took home that title in regards to the ESPN esports side of things. And you have the Shock team, who completely dominated the league in 3-3. We got the introduction of Rollock, and then you had the Shock, who were basically just flawlessly rotating players in and out based on, the game type, because they did run 2 different DPS sets, whether it was, on an escort map or if it was Assault. And, you look at the offseason with what the Shock had been doing, and they basically retained their entire championship roster headed into 2020, only making one adjustment, and that was by releasing Nevix, who would go on to sign with the Toronto Defiant. And then they very recently picked up a sniper specialist who had competed in the Korean boot camps with the Shock, that being Ans, who I don't know if you saw the unveiling of this, Ed, because you were on vacation at the time, but they had like this YouTube video set to premiere, and they basically played this frag highlight of 20 different clips of Ons on Widowmaker, and the thing lasted for what felt like an eternity, basically. Like, it was going on and on. None of them were really from pro matches, and it just got to the point where I'm just like, okay, thank God they, like, put the name at the start, and now I don't have to sit through her and watch, like, 16 more clips. But it's been funny, kind of, like, watching the community reaction to this, because Ans is coming in as someone who was carrying in these boot camp scrimmages. He was someone that was handpicked by Krusty, who everyone hails as, like, the overlord of the Overwatch League. And now all of a sudden people are like, well, why are you guys loading up on DPS when they did the exact same thing in route to the championship in 2019? But, you know, looking back, the way that the Shock went about doing things basically laid out a blueprint. And now you see other teams kind of jumping in on that bandwagon, looking to, like, follow suit. And you just know it's going to be met with varied success and a lot of failure, more than likely, because they do not have the level of talent or the level of depth that the San Francisco Shock have on their roster.
Yeah, I think one of the most impressive things about the Shock and what they did last year is, so they were super dominant, obviously, in the GOATS meta. And then the meta got flipped upside down. Like, you had the 222, and you had the Sigma getting brought in, and all that stuff. Like, they went from dominant in GOATS, which is 3-3, to dominant in a whole different meta and sweeping the whole lower half of the playoff brackets and winning everything. Mm-hmm. Like, that is probably the most impressive thing about all of this. Like, more impressive than what the Titans did. More impressive than what New York did in the playoffs is the fact that, San Francisco just said, we lost one map or one series, we're going to win the next 5 and win the championship. And that's exactly what they did. They came out and they just destroyed. And, it just shows that not only is Krusty like the unspoken god of coaching in Overwatch, it's that you need depth and you need to change things around, because that is one thing that the Shock did better than most. Not many teams would have taken Super out of the starting lineup. Mm-hmm. The Shock did. Not many people would take Sinatraa out of the starting lineup. The Shock did. They went with what their players played best at in that meta. And that's where their depth becomes, like, the biggest advantage, like you said, that they have. So, teams like the Titans, while it's all fine and dandy, they didn't have the depth. They had to basically stick with the same 6 the whole time, and they couldn't rotate around towards people's strengths. So the Shock did something I don't think we'll see again for a long time. Having that golden stage is one of those records I can't imagine being broken often, especially now that we have, like, whole different, like, how the schedule works and everything like that.
The only streak that will be harder to break, in my mind, was the Shanghai Dragons loss streak. Like, that's the only other one.
Yeah, no, that's going to be pretty impossible to break. Yeah, no, that's never getting broken. You're not going 0-40, whatever, anytime soon. That was so ugly. Um, but yeah, the Shock, and going into next season, rightfully so, the Shock are probably the best team in the Overwatch
Oh
League.
yeah, there's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, the Titans are the only ones you could even remotely make an argument for. Like, remotely
Mm-hmm.
make an argument for. And even then, that's a pretty weak case.
Because they have the ultimate wild card.
Yeah. So, like, I'm very excited about the Shock going forward. They did, something that I didn't think could be done, and they did it. So, that's definitely it's something you're not going to see often in esports as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so basically in 2019, we started to see those first step towards being a more global league. And they did this a couple of different ways. Yes, we had the introduction of 8 new teams, so we had 8 expansion teams enter the fold, but we also got our first taste at what a homestand event would be for the Overwatch League, which of course we'll have every week in 2020. Now, going into 2019, we had 8 new teams. So we had, the Atlanta Reign, the Guangzhou Charge, Vancouver Titans, Hangzhou Spark, Paris Eternal, Chengdu Hunters, Toronto Defiant, and then we had the Washington.
Not a Chicago team.
No Chicago team.
That's blasphemy right there.
Yeah. I blame the Justice. It's all their fault.
No, I blame Toronto.
Mostly Toronto, though. They
mostly
don't need 2
Toronto.
Canadian teams. But anyway, so out of these 8 teams, 3 of them did manage to reach the season playoffs. That being the Spark, Reign, and the Titans. Out of the 3, Titans fared the best because they won the upper bracket, punched their ticket into the grand finals, lost it, got swept 4-0, as we talked about, by the Shock on that end. But, we saw them, start to, have these homestand events, which didn't happen in the first stage. They had 3 of them throughout the year. They had 1 in Stage 2, we had 1 in Stage 3, as well as Stage 4. So we had Dallas, Atlanta, and Los Angeles serving as hosts outside of the Blizzard Arena, which we're not going to be going back to in 2020. And, we're entering 2020 now. Well, we're in 2020, but we're entering the 2020 season of the Overwatch League. And you cannot downplay how pivotal of a year this is going to be for the Overwatch League. This is going to be the year that makes or breaks things for the Overwatch League, bar none, as we move to that full-on home and away type scheduling. And, each team out there in the Overwatch League will host anywhere from 2 upwards of 5 homestand events throughout this year. Now, with that, of course, we got format changes. The league games will all be taking place on Saturday and Sunday, so, a departure from the, Thursday through Sunday that we got in 2019. But, we have the introduction of travel, and of course, with that, there are a lot of questions, Ed, that we do not have the answers for. Just a few of which being, well, how will travel impact scrims? Where are teams going to be based out of? Are more teams going to be, based out of, their hometown areas? How is the production going to be handled? How are ticket sales going to look across the globe? And how badly will China outsell literally everyone else combined? We don't know. That might not even be possible just based off of looking at how many seats they have, because I'm pretty sure it's 10 to 12,000 in some of the Chinese venues. Some of the other ones are closer to 2,000, but it's still pretty one-sided in regards to the overall scale on that end. But, this week in particular, we've learned that there are going to be a couple of familiar faces that will not be returning to the Overwatch League, specifically with the on-air talent. We found out today that both Monte Cristo and Chris Puckett will not be back for the 2020 season. And, Puckett, he was always the host. He's going back to doing some freelance work. Maybe he might still be able to show up for, some of the homestand events. He's going to be based out of New York. I think he said, his fiance got, a new job in the city, so he's going to be stationed over there. And then Monte Cristo also said that, his contract expired, it's not getting renewed, so he's doing his own separate way, and there was a huge discussion on Reddit and on social media about the intake of content creation specific to the competitive Overwatch scene, which definitely impacts, everyone within the scene, big or small. But it's definitely, like, shed some not so great looks and lights on just a way that people consume the content that we make. But that's like a discussion for another day. But basically, you have like these two mainstays not returning for 2020. Then you add on the fact that, there are some other big player names who are making the transition to the talent side of things. And it's just kind of like we're at this point now where we're in like this murky water where we don't really have a clear vision of how things are going to be in 2020. We don't know the talent team, we don't know all the rosters, we don't know how the players are going to handle the mental strain of the introduction of travel. So many different things. And it's just left me wondering, like, well, like, hopefully, like, that's not just a bad omen going into the new season at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm. All right, so between Puckett and Monty leaving, I think the bigger deal probably is Monty. Um, Puckett leaving sucks. I like Puckett, but he was a desk host, and I don't want to talk down desk hosts, but it's just like you just need to find somebody with a personality who can control situations. Like that's what you're looking for, and it's just one of those things where you can find somebody like that. Like Puckett wasn't even on the desk every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was him one day, Malik the next day, Puckett the next day, Malik the next day. That's just kind of how it went, or some variation of that. So you still have Malik. I'm sure they'll find one more person to be a desk host, um, to rein in Brand Sideshow, Custa, reinforce Zoe, and whoever else they get. So Puckett will be missed, but it's harder to find like announcers for in game with experience. Like so it's not a knock on Puckett. It's more of a you're trying to find somebody to replace somebody with the experience of Monty in a play-by-play analysis type of situation, and that's hard to do. Um, Now, regardless of how people feel about Monty, he was good for Overwatch. He's good for esports. You need those kind of personalities that people love to hate. Perfect example. People love to hate me, and I'm okay with it. I'm not on Monty's level, and Monty reveled in the fact that people love to hate him. So replacing Monty will be a big deal. Now, I saw some people like, oh, losing Monty's like a huge deal for the Overwatch League. He wasn't part of their top teams. He wasn't even part of their top 2 or 3 teams. Like Monty and Doa were like arguably the number 3 forecasting team out there. So like they weren't like top of the notch. We're gonna give them all the best matches because they're not. They, Uber and Mr. X are the top team, and Akilos and Wolf are probably the number 2 teams, but now they're back in Korea, so we'll see what that all happens. But yeah, losing those two guys sucks, but not the end of the world. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Doa, more so than anything at this point. Whether they pair Jake with him or so whatever they do with it. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but this geolocation thing is going to be the giant test for the Overwatch League because this is going to make or break the whole league. Like, if this does not work, this league falls apart.
Right, because from day one, they always envisioned it as a global league. Now, that being said, like, I do know, like, Drake recently kind of talked about the current situation with how the on-air talent is going to be utilized in regards to casters in particular. And Drake essentially said that when it comes to travel to China, the casters are going to be doing all of the work remotely in LA. Now, outside of that, it seems like the casters will be traveling, they'll be at the home venues, just won't be traveling to China. So it seems like it's going to be a mix of travel and also, remote location in LA. Now, whether or not, like, all the death segments will be done remotely remains to be seen. But for now,
I would imagine so.
That would make the most sense to, like, limit, cut back on a budget a little bit, because you don't want to be spending everything on travel at that end, and it's going to be more controlled in a remote environment, as opposed to just always being on the go,
Mm-hmm. And then you think about it, like, you think of any other sport.
Mm-hmm.
When they cut to halftime, they don't cut to the halftime desk that's on location. No, they go back to the studio and then they talk about it and so on and so forth. I would imagine the desk people. So you're talking your Bren, your your sideshow, your Soe's, and whatnot will probably end up just living in LA and recording out of LA live. In theory.
Mm-hmm.
The no traveling to China thing, okay, that's like, all right, sure, I can see that. Dealing with all that might be chaos, but does that mean they'll still be traveling to Korea, or will they have a separate Korea announce team? Like, will Wolf and Achilles, because I know they moved back to Korea, will they just be the permanent announce team over there? There's still a whole bunch of questions to go on here.
Right. And we won't know probably for a few more weeks, but just basing on how things have been here as of late.
Because God forbid they tell us a month before the season starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was hoping that, Outlaw, since, Flame was talking about, like, all the cartons of juice that he has coming, would actually announce it. And, they're still teasing on social media, on Twitter, 36 minutes ago. Who else is joining the Outlaws in 2020? I don't know, guy. Tell me. Like, I was hoping it would drop mid-show.
And then they announced,
Not gonna
what's the streamer's name?
Violet?
Violet? I've never heard of. Like, no offense to the streamer, never heard of you.
Only thing I know about Violet is that Violet is a Brigwood.
Is it color?
And
I know Violet's a color. That's about it. Like, I've never heard of Violet stream.
Yeah,
so,
I don't follow Violet, so I do not know. Not familiar with her.
Yeah, that was not very big juicy drop there, Flame. Like,
yeah, that probably wasn't the news that they
no,
were,
that was
hinting at.
That was some kindling there, Flame. Yeah, yeah, kindling, Flame.
Yeah. All I'm gonna say is, I'm not vibing with it, because Violet's handle is vibing with Violet.
Oh, see, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, see,
that was a worse joke than mine.
Well, see, I had to explain it to you because I knew you wouldn't know what the hell I was referring to.
I'm pretty sure 99% of all listeners are like, what the hell is Totem talking about?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're on my side, not your side. You suck.
Not always, because they're on my side when it comes to Die Hard.
Go to hell. Die Hard, all right. So I've come around a little bit on Die Hard. That Die Hard is not a Christmas movie, but Die Hard can be a New Year's Eve movie because you can time Hans Gruber being knocked off Nakatomi Plaza perfectly with the ball drop. So he hits the ground right when it hits midnight. New Year's movie. It's called compromise.
Yeah, but also, when it comes to like the physical attack of, the terrorist angle of the whole movie, like there's really not a ton of like holidays that would have had the same impact, like Christmas, where everyone would be in one area.
Mm-hmm. So it's a New Year's movie, not a Christmas movie. That's what I'm going with now.
Says the person who was telling me to like name more ironic. I can't even remember how you worded it, but like more ironic Christmas songs for the top 5, and you're like, oh, well, you could totally say Die Hard. could be on here, and I was like, well, technically, like by definition, you just admitted that it is a Christmas movie, but just ironically.
I'm blaming that on the alcohol.
Yeah,
I'll just go with that. I'm blaming that on the whiskey.
If you say so. So with that being said, that's basically been the bulk of the biggest changes that we saw, both to Overwatch and the Overwatch League in 2019. So we peered ahead of some of the unknown in regards to 2020, both between now and the release of Overwatch 2, and then of course when it comes to the global landscape of the Overwatch League as we step closer and closer to that grand vision that Nate Nancer had when the Overwatch League was first announced. So Ed, I think it's time that we close out shop for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, the best thing to do is, of course, to head over to iTunes, leave us a review, let us know how we're doing. And Ed, like, I don't know if you saw, we actually got 2 new reviews this week.
I saw this.
Which is 2 more than what we normally get.
You know what? Your math checks out.
And, I feel like I had something partially to do with this, because, like, I screenshotted the fact that we had 69 reviews. And I was like, nice. It all goes downhill from here, and then all of a sudden we're at 71, right? So, like...
You're like, wait a second.
I'm pretty sure that was the catalyst. That kind of like sparked that change. So with that being said, Ed, I'm gonna go ahead and read the first one, and then I'll throw it over to you for the second review that we got. So our first review was a 5-star iTunes review sent from Agent Life 23, who just so happens to be our newest patron, by the way. He says, "Great job, guys. Listen all the time. You keep the community informed about what is going on in Overwatch while also making it entertaining. Keep up the good work. I know that it takes a lot of your schedule to make the show happen, and we appreciate it." Little does he know.
Well, see, here's the thing.
For Ed's part, right? That's Ed.
Yeah, I don't do shit. I just show up. Like, Totem puts together notes, sends it to me. I show up. He does all the editing, all that stuff. This is the cushioniest position I could ever be in. I show up at 7 o'clock Central on Wednesdays.
Hope that I'm not in a battleground.
Yeah, and then Totem takes care of the rest. But Totem puts together a ridiculous amount of work into all of this. So all the extra work goes all towards Totem. I don't do shit. But welcome to the family, Agent Life 23.
Mm-hmm.
So, our second review was also a 5-star iTunes review from Bearded Poggers, also known as Geo. He is the host of Dropping Spicy, an Apex podcast. So he screams, Edinar, top 5. Little backstory to that is every time me and him drop in Apex, I scream out, top 5. And then we barely ever get top 5. But I still scream it every time. So he's like, I love the show, man. You're high quality guys. So I knew the show would be as well. As far as Totally Drunk, I've been a fan since I first heard you talk about Overwatch. Your knowledge of the pro scene, both in OWL and outside of OWL, baffles him. It baffles all of us, Gio. I don't even know where he finds the time. But he says, keep the show going, and I can't wait to continue listening. So thank you, Gio, for the 5-star review. I appreciate it. And yes, Totem baffles all of us.
So with that being said, guys, thank you again so much for letting us know how we're doing. We appreciate all of the feedback that we get. So thank you so much for the reviews, because, they don't always come every week, and sometimes it can be a couple of months in between that as well. So outside of that, of course, if you guys are looking to consume more Overwatch-related content, check out Overwatch Recall, which is our podcast directory featuring all sorts of Overwatch content, whether it's Overwatch, Overwatch League, Path to Pro, Fantasy Overwatch League, Overwatch Lore, everything and anything in between. That is at owlnshow.com/OW Recall, and then every Sunday night, we do the weekly recall, which has the episodic listing of all the prior week's podcast episodes, and that will be tweeted on our Twitter at OW Recall. Now, of course, if you'd like to support our network, you can do so a couple of different ways. We do stream on Twitch, so if you throw your Twitch Prime subs, which cost you absolutely nothing, we greatly appreciate that. Otherwise, you could sub, which is $4.99 on Twitch. Then, of course, we do have our Patreon page, where we have tiers starting at just $1 a month. So for more info, visit our Patreon at patreon.com/OWL Network. So as I did mention prior to this, we do have a new patron in Agent Live 23 who sent in one of those reviews, who pledged in the Master tier. So we appreciate the review, and of course, every little bit helps, so we greatly appreciate all the support you've shown us this week. So if you want to join Agent Live 23 and our Master and Above patrons, like you do, hop over to Patreon, throw us like $5, and then you get a shout out pretty much every show, along with the likes of Blazing Bob, Brendan, JC, Owl, Kesha, and Agent Life 23 in helping our network grow. So thank you guys so much for all of your continued support. And I did have like a 2019 year in review that I posted within the last week on our Patreon as well, just kind of like highlighting how much content we had released across the network. Just like an update on, general direction and all of that good stuff. But Ed, with that being said, of course, we do have a number of different ways how our listeners can get a hold of us. So why don't you go ahead and let them know how they can do that?
All right. So you can reach us through email at hndoverwatch@gmail.com. We are on Twitter, and that's at hndoverwatch. We do have a website where we post all our stuff, and that's www.owlnshow.com. We are on YouTube at youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. So go over there, check out all that fun stuff, and Spider the Abyss posts some stuff from time to time. We are on Discord at discord.me/OWLNshow. And then we do stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLNshow. We are a Twitch affiliate, so help the show by subscribing to our channel and earn our network emoticon. We do podcast pretty regularly. So Overwatch League Network airs Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. OWL by the Numbers, which should be returning next week. Our Fantasy Overwatch podcast airs Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. And then this show, Heroes Never Die, airs Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then host streams, when available, run on a flex schedule. So be sure to follow us to be notified when we go live. And then, like Totem said, we do have a Patreon over at patreon.com/OWL Network. So go over there if you want to help support the show and the podcast network even further. You can contact me personally, Edinar, on Twitter at EdinarOverwatch, or when I stream at twitch.tv/Edinar. Totem, where can they find you?
You can also find me on Twitter. That is at TumblerDrunkCTR, where this past week I was counting down my top 10 horror movies from 2019. And then, of course, I do stream on Twitch. That is at twitch.tv/TumblerDrunk. So yes, as you mentioned, Ed, OWL by the Numbers back next Tuesday. We got a couple of interviews coming up these next few weeks with some of the Fantasy Overwatch League providers, at least in regards to the platform. So we have Matt, aka Soul Drink, from highnoon.gg, and then of course we'll have Chris, aka Fowl, from fantasyowl.com, which is the daily format. So stay tuned for all of that and so much more. But with that being said, guys, you've been listening to episode number 191 of Heroes Never Die. I've been your host, I'm Late Drunk, joined as always by my co-host Edinar, and we will see you guys back next week for our next episode. Take care and have a good night.
Adios.